Everyone, welcome back to Tech Talk Tuesday, where every week we try to give something to help your threat hunting and security program. And today we're joined by Kevin Flowers, who's going to talk about how to get started in cybersecurity as a career field. He'll explore some of his background, talk through why he's a good person to talk through this. It's recency. So some of us have been in the field a little longer. Kevin's a few positions in, and so he's a very timely source for someone that entered the field within the last few years. So, Kevin, how about you kick off and talk about just how you got into the field a little bit, your background, where you're at now, and such?
Sure. Again, my name is Kevin Flowers. I'm a lead industrial cybersecurity analyst at 1898 & Co. Under Burns and Mac. So a little bit about me. I started my whole path through the academic route, right? I didn't just come in from, experiencing it firsthand in the military like some of these guys did. I didn't even really see myself coming into cyber. Honestly, I thought I was going to be, an IT manager somewhere or a DBA or something, and that's kind of what I was going to school for. I graduated from U of H just a few years back now. My bachelor's was going to be for computer information systems. So, ultimately you learn some of the familiar things that you see along the road in cyber. So you get the exposure to networking and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, my initial aim was going to be a DBA. Like I said, I was into Oracle and SQL and thought it was interesting. So I kind of just walked through the right doors that were opened by some of my mentors and the important people in my life during the collegiate path. So yeah, got my master's at UH as well, and shortly thereafter joined Grim, and that's how Dan and I met. And then we're jumped over to 1898 not too long ago. So that's me in a nutshell.
So talking about that transition, when you were thinking, hey, how many years were you in academia first? What were you doing generally for academia?
Yeah. So I had a kind of unconventional path through academia. It took a little longer, just stops and starts and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But at first, it was my interest was in the medical field, and then I decided, maybe IT is more my path. And at first, I wanted to do like software development. That's I think the way to phrase it is I enjoy software development as a hobby. I don't think it would have worked out for me too well as a full-time job. So, yeah.
How'd you find that first gig? I know, so Grim was your first cybersecurity gig, right? And I think, if I remember it right from my word on the street, I think you had kind of known someone that knew someone over at Grim. So
Yep.
There was some personal connection that helped you land that first role. I mean, What did that look like for you, right? Obviously, you had the degree. Some say the degree gets you in the door. The truth is it doesn't always. I mean, internships, other stuff matter. But for you, like, how did you get that first job in cybersecurity?
Yeah. So I definitely think the degree opened the door, but like I said, it's being able to identify the opportunity and walk through it. Right. There were plenty of people who were in my similar position, right? Who I was my peers. I was going to class with them every day, and a lot of them were, much brighter than I was. But it's just the effort, right? It's the amount of extra that you do, right? So while I was at the university, I ended up working in the cybersecurity lab. And that coincided with me taking a cybersecurity, like basic intro to cybersecurity with Christopher Bronk, one of the OGs. And no, he was an amazing teacher. He was just super personable and had a wealth of experience, from the government side of things. But yeah, he was an amazing professor, and he started this whole journey. He got that little spark going and got the ball rolling. I was in a fortuitous position where I just went to go talk to him just because I enjoyed talking to him, and he was like, "Hey, well, we're going to need someone to run the cybersecurity lab, and we don't usually offer that to undergrads, but you're I think we can trust you. You're not going to walk out with all the servers and everything. So how about we give it a go? Let's see what happens. And yeah, I mean, after that, I started helping out around, doing extra stuff with the Cybersecurity Club. I was a TA for a little bit, a research assistant over a summer. I met Dr. Conklin, who was the person that knew Tom Van Norman from Grimm. So yeah, Dr. Arthur Conklin, also another amazing guy, taught me a lot about OT and
Mhm.
cyber, and that's kind of, that was another door that opened, and we literally had the cybersecurity lab, and then down the road or down the office or down the hall by Conklin's office, there was the SCADA lab, and
Mhm.
I had always known that there was something over there, but could never get in there. So I asked him one day, "Hey, you open that? Can I see what's in there?" And of course, it's all over after that. But I saw the Grim cyber wall, and that just sealed the deal. I saw that. I saw the big red button and all the pumps and actuators and everything else, and I was enamored. I said I have to learn more about that. So every day, the lab was quiet or slow. I'd head out over there and just run PCAPs or just gather PCAPs and try to figure out what exactly was happening. And before I knew it, that became a project that some of my classmates and I were working on. And then that's how we met Tom, because he actually flew down to show us and fill in some of the blanks. We had a certain understanding, but at that point we were from IT, and the OT nature of these devices was totally foreign to us. So we were getting part of the way there, but we really needed that industry experience to come and like, oh well, you know what, you're not totally wrong, but this is what these devices are doing. So yeah, but it was just that little chain, right? From initial
Mhm.
introduction to cyber, which I never really thought of, to a an opportunity that presented itself with my professor, and then that door opened OT, and then OT, that first initial OT uh, experience led me to Tom, and after I graduated, we literally went out at Houston after HughesCon, and like, yeah, let's do this thing. If you're game, I'm game. So that's how it all started.
And I think that first position's the hardest because even when I was in school, and I was in school in the mid 2000s ish, and not to fully date myself, but back then to that point, the hardest thing I feel like to initially get is that initial experience, because there's a big wall on that. Starting out with no knowledge or maybe completely theoretical
Right.
knowledge from a course, and that hey, you've done something actually, sorry, academia, out in the real world
Yeah.
on a real
Yeah.
plant with real data. And, to you, it sounds like you did it through the lab. For me, I went through the US Air Force route. I think my first internship with the Air Force, they were paying us like $8 a day up at the research lab in Rome, New York, which isn't much. At the same time, like, what's more valuable than that $8 a day as a college kid? And by the way, I think they were taking a few dollars off for lodging anyway as we were going, right? But that's, I think a key part of that is, a lot of employers, it's hard when you don't have that experience, but even you get that first little bit of experience and it helps you when you go into the interviews, right?
Right. Right. Yeah. It's definitely, because I've had people uh, at U of H currently reach out to me and say, hey, what are your what, what are your pieces of advice? What do you suggest? And a lot of it is, I tell them just like this: it's not just the academic stuff that you read in the books. It's the fundamentals of like cyber and like computers in general, the networking, that'll keep on coming back throughout your career, but also the networking. How we met, how I met Tom, how I made use of those interactions and relationships. I think that is the real trick for university, because I can't remember who said it, but I mean, when else, unless you know this person or they're a close family friend, or they're literally part of your family, when else are you going to get access to, Dr. Conklin, for instance, who was a plant manager and ex Navy guy for 20, 30 years, right? Like that kind of experience doesn't, not everyone has that. And to be able to have undivided uh, time with that individual, I mean, that's most college students don't realize the background their professors come from, right?
Hmm.
Um, those people usually want to give back, and they they earned a lot of that experience, and they've built careers out of it before coming to academia most of the time. So
Yep. And how is it? I mean, so you get that job, right? You get kind of that first full time paying job. You know, how was it kind of getting that confidence up, building that skill set, being put on? I mean, you were in consulting, right? And so
right.
consulting, it's kind of project to project, and it's not fake it till you make it. There is a bit of it there.
Oh yeah,
You also sometimes know a little more in some areas than the customer knows. They might know certain things better than you in niche areas by their skills or expertise. So I mean, how was that journey on getting that first position, particularly in consulting, right? And kind of working those first, right? How did you build, your expertise up? How are you learning on the job?
yeah. I was fortunate, to be placed on a project early on that kind of complemented my skill set. So I was a research assistant for a little while there near the end of my collegiate career, but also in college. I mean, you're writing papers, you're researching things constantly, right? So it was a very nice transition into that. Have years and years of experience under their belt. So learning from those people, Dan Gunter, it's it's an important thing to be able to do because you know uh, you literally just have to be a sponge, right? You need to be
Mhm.
listening to whatever things about cyber, always just cruising the web and just be open to these new experiences and to the new relationships that you have to make the best of, right? Um, yeah, you can't, you don't want to stagnate early on. You don't, just because you got the degree. Yeah, that was the first step, right? And the
Mhm.
first job, just just prove yourself, right? Make yourself proud, make everyone around you proud, and that's it, right? Just
I,
hustle.
and I think to that point, right? Like it's kind of like investing, like your 401k or whatever you put in, right? Like interest compounds in a 401k generally. What you put in, if you follow the market, it generally compounds on itself. I feel like, kind of to your point, knowledge also compounds, right? You see people come in and, some will come in straight out of school overconfident. Oh, I was taught this. I was top of the class. Oh, I had really good GPA, right? And at some point, they either stop learning or they don't make that learning a priority, right? To where I feel like, to your point, if you kind of get in that state to where that knowledge can compound, it very quickly can set you above your peers, both on advancement or on, just getting better assignments, even, right? Or getting better projects. What do you think about that?
I would wholeheartedly agree. And another thing is, I mean, in those when you're put in those situations, especially with contract work, that you're interfacing with clients and various other people that may or may not, like your point, they may have a lot more experience and knowledge in one area. Um, it's kind of your job to come in and round out everything, not to be the smartest guy in the room, right? You need to leverage their experience. You need to leverage your own. You need to leverage your team. But I've found um, a lot of the time coming in with just an open mind, not being overconfident, not being that person that says, "Oh well, this is simple. You're stupid. This is what you should have done." Very prescriptive. No, people don't like the cybersecurity contractors and folks like that, um, because maybe sometimes they can come off arrogant or whatever. But if you're there to help build something, build a solution with someone, I think that mentality goes a long way. And people
Yep.
respect that, and they'll help you with that, right? Because they understand that you're trying to help them. So,
And And I mean, you entered too, like the industrial cybersecurity space, which is what you've been in most of your career now across both firms you've been at. It is a niche space, right? And art at U of H, right? And there are other community colleges and other programs that are starting to get industrial cybersecurity programs, right? But how was that transition into industrial cybersecurity, right? Because if you had the course in school, it was probably pretty textbooks. Some of those textbooks are really old or from version to version. They haven't
Right.
changed much since the 90s or 2000s or even
Yeah.
earlier when they were written, right? And so, I mean, how kind of on that compounding knowledge, how were you able to jump into kind of this niche industrial space and quickly go from, kind of seeing the walls in the classroom and knowing some of the theory into, really being at one of the top consulting firms or ProServe focused firms like 1898 is, right, for the space, right? How was that transition?
I mean, so it sometimes doesn't feel real. It has been a lot very quickly, but again, it's just comes back to that whole leveraging my strengths and the strengths of my team. 'Cause it's a team sport, right?
Mhm.
I don't really know how else to put that, but I
Yeah.
I couldn't have done everything by myself, and just the mentality of being, you know,
Mhm.
ready to jump into something both feet first, right? You can't just fake things. You can't just give it 50% effort. You really gotta go for it. And just
Mhm.
there's always stuff to learn. Um, like it's kind of a cop out answer, but
No, I don't think it is at all. What have been some of your favorite places to learn from? I mean, where do you go to learn these days? Obviously, you mentioned teammates a lot when you're on firms that can help. We worked a lot together when we were working on. So we were working on. It's open, so we can talk about it. We were
all right,
working on Idaho National Labs Coyote projects. So a lot of the Coyote recipes. You and I collaborated on their projects of that scale. That's a very kind of well-known public one, but I mean, like again, like what resources were you looking at? Was it YouTube? Was it books? Like what's available to someone coming into this space?
yeah, I remember a lot of the research was, I mean, it was all OSINT stuff, so I would spend
Mhm.
so much time just reading all sorts of articles on Google Scholar and just writing down a list of terms. Like, I don't know what that is. I don't know what this is, but let me go look it up right after the fact, right?
Mhm.
And yeah, plenty of YouTube videos. I mean, Professor Messer is out there. He'll help you, learn about the Security Plus or anything else you're trying to do. Shout out. But yeah, there's so many resources. It's just there's a wealth of knowledge out there. And also for a more OT specific um, couple of books, there's Hacking Exposed by Clint Badungeon and
Mhm.
I'm forgetting the title. I don't think I have that one here, but Mr. Pascal Ackerman's industrial cybersecurity book as well. I mean, and these guys have been doing it forever. So these are all people that you need to kind of tap into. Um,
Yep.
there's plenty of others, but right, there's white papers, books, videos, whatever you name it, sponge it up.
Yep, yep, exactly, exactly. And I find too, like again, back to your peers, whether they're at your same firm or consultants too. We've had engagements to where the win was not even talking to the cybersecurity group; it was talking to a plant manager, or talking to someone in the ops center that's been sitting at the keyboard as an engineer 20 years. And you're like, "Hey, we're doing a pen test. How would you break this?" And
Yeah,
they're like, "I would just break it this way." And it's like, okay, let's go write that in Python and do it, right? But it's one to where you wouldn't have thought about what they would have said if you wouldn't have had like 15 to 20 years of them sitting at the keyboard, just knowing their process better, right?
right. I mean, who knows their you know, everything's function than the guy who's there, working at it every day or who's got 10 years there. You're not going to walk in and know more than that guy immediately. So be humble. And once you are put in those situations, and you know what, just listen. Sometimes some people will drop a knowledge bomb on you and it's a good thing. Yeah. And
So,
going back to, sorry, but going
oh
back to
no, you're
peers,
good.
because I just love this story, and I keep on getting excited because I'm still looking at the minor attack right now. But there were so many days when I was working at Grim that Dan and I would go bother him. First of all, I'd just be like, "Hey Dan, what is this whole thing? Have you ever done like DLL masquerading or anything like this? DLL injection?" And Dan's over here talking to me about like, "Oh yeah, that's how they hack video games. That's what they do. Yeah, just DLL injection." And so there, all those little those situations you got to make the best of because you don't run into Dan's all the time. Someone willing to just go out of their way, give you some time, and teach you something. So be receptive to that.
And I think to that point, what's interesting there, and kind of to pull a point out of there, like I was a subcontractor to y'all. Like we kind of had we weren't in like a formal mentoring kind
Yeah,
of position, and all like contractually we were coworkers on that, right? But to that point, I think you find that both through projects like we worked on together. You find that through some through formal mentorship, some through if you've stayed in touch with professors, some through LinkedIn and other social, right? So, kind of finding someone in the space to shadow can, I think, help a lot. And I was even talking to recently a local college freshman who was nervous because he's like, I don't have an internship. And I was like, hey, like, don't worry about not having an internship after your freshman year. It's fine. Like the better internships generally come later in school because some companies are just like, what can someone after their first year of school do for us, right?
right.
But still the feedback was like, hey, find out what your professors, if you're at a research school, find out what they're writing research on, right? Try to get involved, try to, do something proactively, right? If you're going through the academic route. If you're not, like try to speak at a conference. ICS Village, who you brought up Tom Van Norman, and Bryson, who's actually owner of Grim, right? They're both the co-founders of ICS Village. ICS Village runs the ICS area at DEF CON, runs it at RSA, runs it at other conferences, right? There's speaking tracks that I'm not going to say they're easy to get onto always. At the same time, there's ways to get out there and speak and to get that exposure, right? Whether you're going through a structured academic route or you're going through kind of the self-taught way.
Definitely. Yeah. And that's near the end of my college career. That's what you know my professors were telling me. It's like, yes, you're going to get the degree, but it's also you want to show what you can do. So tailor your
Yeah.
resume to that. Do all the action words and all that stuff. It's about your results as much as it is about the theory, right?
Yep. Yep. So going from that first to second job, right? So you landed the first job, you worked there. You were there a few years, right? 2 years, 1 year? I can't remember.
Yeah, it's about a year and a half.
Year and a half. And then you went kind of for that second job. How was the experience after that year and a half, after having some work behind you, under you, again, going to one of the firms that's 1898 is tied to Burns McDonald. For those not aware, Burns McDonald's a major engineering firm. 1898 is kind of one of the bigger niche industrial focused services firms out there. So how was it, year and a half, 2 years in, then going for kind of a bigger shop than what Grim was at the time you were there?
I think Grim prepared me in so many ways, but yeah, I mean, it just felt like the next logical step. Um, and my experience here so far has been nothing short of amazing. It's definitely different. It's definitely a little bit bigger and it feels more corporate, but because it is, right?
Mhm.
But it's been a great experience, a great team, and lots of interesting things to learn every day. It's something new. Um,
What
and
did that experience help you in the interview process? Was it definitely a lot more helpful to go through hey, this is what I've done in the past, or were you kind of
yes,
also networked into that?
yeah. So the funny story was, well, so I heard down the grapevine, but initially, the one of the gentlemen that ended up hiring me over here at 1898, Matt Morris, him and Tom had met up at the, it was USecCon or RSA, one of those bigger conferences, and
Mhm.
somehow they got to talking, and my name popped up. I had already been hired in 1898, and Tom was like, "No, wait a second, no, I got him," you know. So it was kind of funny, but yeah, initially before I had ever started at Grimm, before I'd ever applied, I was in talks with Matt, who reached out to me, and I you know s- saw like an opportunity for me to start
Mhm.
early in my career and grow there. But yeah, it just kind of the stars aligned after I left Grimm that the position was ready and waiting for me, and so it was just kind of a random networking opportunity that it presented itself. Um, but yeah,
And I think it's a testimony, though, too, when you're talking like, Tom was I think he's the VP. He was basically the head of cyber physical at Grimm. And,
yep,
I know at 1898 you were talking, I think he's also one of the high ups of services, right? Or he is the head up. I know Marco just left, right? And so,
yep,
um, so I mean, that's the point too, to where, you know, you do good work. And I feel like for you, you had done awesome work at Grimm. And so that's where, as you were looking at kind of the move and as you were going through, quality of work, what you're working on, everything does, I'm not going to say it's a permanent record to where someone's opening a sheet and they're like, you did this right or wrong on this day, but it is something that is like, it's more than just luck. It's not just
right.
luck getting your next role for the most part, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's the one thing that I keep on hearing, but this is a pretty specialized industry, right? So there's only so many people doing it, and to get your name recognized and known, I mean that carries a lot of weight. So just do your best, make yourself proud, right? And that'll go a long way. That's what I'm finding,
And
at least so far.
yeah, yeah. And what kind of projects are you doing these days in the industrial space? Like what does it mean to even be an industrial consultant
Yeah,
at
um,
1898?
yeah, yeah. So early on there was a lot of you know, how do I say this? Essentially coming into a much larger project, right? The scales of the projects are different than anything I'd ever really taken part in, and like time scales and just breadth of the project. Initial assessment that had taken place way before I ever showed up, and there were um, there was a lot of data that needed to be sifted through and analyzed, and just made sense of. Because one of the deliverables for the client was going to be a network diagram, a series of network diagrams actually that essentially defined and described their entire production facility, right? Um, so coming into it, it was a lot of research on what these different devices were. Again, with research, it's always going to be there, right? Because you don't know every industrial device. You're never going to, you get familiar with a bunch of them, and that'll take you far. But yeah, there's always something new. Um, and then the actual analysis and you know essentially just sifting and putting things together. Like, okay, this subnet, this network, this is how these things talk. There's a lot of that happens. So yeah, and at this point, I've been on a few projects that are kind of following that same vein. Um, but yeah, there's a lot of that's already gone on, and then it's going to be some additional pen test, gap assessments, things like that. So very cool work on the horizon, but also very interesting work that I've done up to this
And I
point.
think what's interesting to that too is also how the different firms are different. So again, you look at like 1898 and because of the Burns tie, they have true professional engineers. You have actual PE rated engineers, right? To where you go over, to like a Dragos that is a very strong professional services player in this space, but they're definitely more cybersecurity people and they probably have a few PEs over there, but it's not at the like Burns McDonald level, right? And so
Right.
to that point, I mean, the other interesting thing is each firm has its own strengths and weaknesses, right? And on that mentorship side, right, there's kind of different flavors you could potentially get from a like, okay, this is a bunch of this is a very engineer firm versus this is a very cybersecurity firm, right? And
Yep.
we do professional services on our side too, right? But we fall more in that cybersecurity camp than we do people with actual Ps that can stamp blueprints, right?
Haven't seen a project like that yet, but one of the cool things that I'd never seen before was that Burns and Mac and 1898 will work hand in hand sometimes when it comes to literally building a facility and then doing the cyber on top of it. And that's fascinating to me, right? From breaking ground to actual infrastructure installation, and networking, running cables, everything. That's all possible.
Yep. So let me give you two scenarios. So one, the people that are already in the workforce and they're wanting to jump over to industrial cybersecurity, what advice do you have for them? That's number one. And number two, people that are more on your path or the path I went down. I also went through academia first through ROTC, joined the Air Force, did all that. We went through kind of the academic side. So second question would be for someone coming from the academic side, how do they get, into the field? How do they line it up while in college and then kind of follow? So again, break those two down for us if you don't mind.
So, how you jump into it from the academic side? Take that one first. Um, I think it ultimately boils down to, well, first being exposed to it, right? Because I never knew about OT cyber until I was nearly about to start my advanced degree, right? And it just no one had really talked about it, so I think the exposure is critical, right? You got to know that it's out there. That's why it's so important to just talk to people and be aware of these things, right? We take how the lights stay on for granted a lot of times, how the water comes out of the tap, but there are processes around that you just you need to know about. Um, so from the collegiate path, it really does necessitate some networking ability, but also your projects, right? If you have a fascination with it, go and do something, go and build something. Uh, Pumps and things like that are pretty cheap. Raspberry Pi, if you can get them nowadays, it's not too bad. Practice soldering, practice doing building up a little circuit board, right? But show and document and report that this is what you did, right? I think that's so critical, uh, and you will see that, right? And if you write a report, tie it into MITRE. These guys do a lot of good work in the OT space, but also just in general cybersecurity, industrial, and enterprise cyber. So that's a good resource that I'm sure we both lean on nearly daily. So um, yeah, it's being aware of it and then making the moves to actually build up your portfolio and your resume to show that you've done things, you have results in addition to your collegiate background, because that will take you far, but it's not going to take you the whole way.
Mhm.
And I'm
How
sorry,
about for the
yeah,
coming from another field?
coming from another field.
Yeah.
I mean, anyone can cyber. Anyone can do it. Um, it will take time and effort, and you have to have the grit for it, right? So as far as skills you need to know, I keep on telling everyone that networking, not only just interpersonal networking, but knowing the ins and outs of just basic protocols, how these computers talk to one another. 'Cause ultimately, that's what you're trying to secure, right? If you can't ever reach the computer, do you really need to secure it? Yes and no, but you know, uh, know how things are supposed to talk, know how they do, know the avenues and the networks that the data transfers over, and that'll take you pretty far. 'Cause that is something that'll keep on coming up. Firewall configs, switch configs, uh, all sorts of things like that. You need to know how to break things where you can fix them properly, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And kind of, I guess, his parting thoughts, because I think we're coming towards the end now. Any last thoughts? I know you mentioned some good resources. We talked through a bunch today, but what's kind of your last piece of advice as we wrap up?
Um, Definitely, just try to meet people that do the things that you're passionate about and that you find to be interesting. Um, it's still one of my coolest memories. I was building up a CTF with one of my classmates while I was in. We were both TAs at U of H, right? And so we were trying to figure out, like, man, how should we build this CTF? So I was trying to use some technology. I can't remember. I think it was developed by one of the labs. But anyways, so I found this group's GitHub, and I was just like, hey, you know what? Let me take a shot in the dark. I'm not really sure how to move past this hurdle that I've encountered. Let me just shoot an email and see if someone responds. Right? I don't know if this is maintained or anything. It's been a little bit, and sure enough, a couple of days later, someone responded, and they were ecstatic that I was trying to use their platform for what I was trying to use it for, because they had never thought about it, but they were incredibly helpful. And they most people are very receptive to things like that, right? So be confident, go out, ask people for help, ask people for their advice, their suggestions, and most of the time, people are going to be pretty nice. They most people in this field, I think, want to help build other people up, right? Um, so that's probably the main piece of advice. But yeah, just go out and learn about what's out there. It's a big cyber world. Um, there's tons, and you're never going to know all of it. But you can cut out your little piece of it, and you'll do well.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And I think, we live in the information age today, right? And you look online, right? And you were talking about like Professor Messer's videos, right? And I think he's the PLC professor guy, right? Is there another one out there too? Or he's the CompTIA one.
Yeah,
There's
I think
another
it's
PLC
yeah,
professor guy too.
yeah.
Um, and between that, and I mean, between, Sans ICS posts their conference videos out, and we do Tech Talk Tuesday, which is actually what this episode's on, to where we try to hit stuff every week. So there's a lot you can do virtually, right? There's a lot of virtual conferences. But as we mentioned, right, there's to that networking component on how do I even start networking? There's a lot you can do in the community. Some might incur a little bit of travel costs. There are conferences. I mean, DEF CON's had a car hacking village for a while. Now they're having satellite hacking and other stuff. There's the ICS village that we mentioned that's out there. That's at DEF CON. It's at RSA. It's at other major conferences. ICS Village is a nonprofit. It's one we're heavily involved with, too, from the educational side. When we go out to RSA, it's actually more educational than it is project pitching, right? And so, again, the getting out there, the talking at that. We have some other fun events coming up actually at Vegas for Black Hat this year. We rented out Dig This one night, so we're going to have the opportunity to learn a lot of OT stuff and then literally drive an excavator across the desert.
That sounds
For
like
us
fun.
four, we're sponsoring the beer bash, and then at the end we're going to get one of the mugs that you were shown on there. Show your mug real
Oh
quick.
yeah.
Oh
See?
yeah, this was last year's mug. There we
Oh
go.
yeah.
Unplanned placement. We didn't ask him to do that. But at that we're having we rented a rooftop movie theater in Miami Beach out, completely free, completely for anyone that'll be there from the conference or wants to learn, right? And so there are ways. Some of those do involve a little bit of travel, but there's ways to get plugged in because to one thing that I hope stuck out today, it's a small community. The
Oh,
first time you work with someone, and even if you part ways, it's likely not going to be the last.
right.
Everyone moves around. And so I think to your point, a theme that I heard all the way through was just the importance of networking and doing good work and just, building solid experience, right?
Yep.
Well,
Agreed.
thanks for joining us this week, Kevin. It was great having you.
Of course.
And we'll have to have you on again.
Yes, sir. No, it was great. Always great talking to you, Dan.
Awesome. Thanks again for everyone tuning in, and we hope to see you back next week.